Welcome to Diagnosing Dx, the podcast giving diagnostics the platform it deserves. While therapeutics and devices often take centre stage, diagnostics is the engine driving precision medicine. I'm your host, David Philby, and each week we spotlight the innovators, breakthroughs, and real-world challenges shaping the future of DX. In this episode, I'm joined by Mustafa Al-Adhami, CEO and founder of Astek Diagnostics. His journey from refugee to diagnostics founder is remarkable, but the mission behind Astek is even more powerful. We explore how his team built a platform that can confirm a UTI, detect E. coli, and identify the right antibiotic in 1 hour, potentially preventing sepsis and transforming care. Welcome, Mustafa, to the show this week. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good. I was going to upfront ask you about your investment in Beyond Meat, but I think we'll park that for another conversation. I've seen your update on LinkedIn.
It was a joke because the gold dropped like 6%, which is unheard of. And then I look at Beyond Meat and it had like skyrocketed. I was
It's
like,
crazy.
money out of gold putting in Beyond Meat or something. So that's why I posted that.
100%. I hope you and I are in the same boat. That I'm one of the lucky ones on Palantir this year. Let's say that my entry price is looking ridiculous now. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
I actually invested in Iris Energy, Iron.
Yes, I was in Iron as well. Yeah.
So I've been with them since their IPO. So I watched them go from 27 to like 70 cents, and I keep buying. I really believe in renewable energy use for data centers.
Right.
So now, I mean, they just opened a 61. So I'm a happy guy today.
Good for you. All right, good. Unfortunately, that's not the purpose of today, but it's always worth talking about. Mustafa, I'm really excited to hear about Astek because it's more than just technology. There's a real story behind this one, which I think deserves to be shared. Before we get into that, do you want to introduce yourself and what you've been doing and who you are, and then we'll get into it?
Absolutely. So my name is Mustafa. I'm the CEO and founder of Astek Diagnostics. I am originally from Iraq, so I lived through, the 2003 war. Ended up becoming a refugee in 2007. Got a scholarship to study engineering in Jordan and then Germany. At the same time, I kind of figured out like I need to find a way to make money, so I started a small company that was a software to translate dialects from Iraqi Arabic into standard Arabic into English. That ended up being sold when I was 21, and that was kind of my ticket to freedom. So I was not a refugee anymore, and I used that money to come to the United States and do my PhD. So I've been in the U.S. for 10 years. Did a PhD in mechanical engineering at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And about around the time that I was about to graduate, my grandfather developed a urinary tract infection, and just watching him go through, he was in pain, he was delirious, he ended up falling, breaking his hip, and just watching him go from a young 87-year-old to a much, much older one made me realize that someone has to do something about the way that UTI is looked at, treated, diagnosed, and that's how Astek Diagnostics was founded.
Wow. So the backstory, and unfortunately, what happened to your grandfather? Did you have any ties or knowledge around sort of UTIs, infections, or even sort of how they're diagnosed before that? Had you sort of come across it in anything you've been doing before or studying?
So not like in school. I was a mechanical engineer. I was studying how plastic breaks for a
Right.
long time. But I had an idea like you need to do a culture, but I never thought that when a physician was giving me antibiotics, it was just a guess. Like I really had no idea. But when my grandfather was given the first antibiotic and it did not work, was given the second antibiotic and it didn't work, and it took the culture 4 days to come back, I kind of learned firsthand that whatever we're doing is not working. And there has to be a way to know what antibiotic to give patients very, very quickly.
I completely understand exactly where you're coming from, because I think, having worked in this industry now, you find out how slow, how sort of things are averaged rather than specific. And obviously we're seeing a big boom in sort of precision medicine and stuff at the moment. But I think I always find it baffling that the average person walking down the street lives their life assuming if
Mhm.
they have a UTI, they go and get that checked and immediately are being told exactly what it is quickly, and it's dealt
Mhm.
with. And the reality of how these things are currently dealt with is so far behind what people's assumption is as they live their lives, and they only find out the hard way when it happens to them, and they suddenly are like, what's going on? Why isn't this working? Why is things so slow? And that is just this recurring theme across diagnostics right now. It's not right now, in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the case of UTI, it 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 can be the case where you go into the physician's office and you get that same antibiotic, which is Bactrim. Everyone gets Bactrim, and you could be one of the lucky 50% where
Right.
Bactrim works. But if you are part of the other 50% where Bactrim doesn't work, the pain could get worse. You start maybe getting fevers, and worst of all, could become septic because the infection was not treated properly.
Right.
And um, most of sepsis cases originate as UTIs, and sepsis is the leading cause of death in U.S. hospitals.
Yeah. Yeah. Scary numbers still.
Absolutely.
Um, so then talk to me, Mustafa. So you have this idea, you got this, obviously this desire driven from personal experience and a family experience. How do you go about starting the company that becomes Aztec? And I suppose, actually, first, so who is Aztec? What's the product and science that you're bringing to the market?
Yeah. So we have developed a platform that can tell physicians if there is a UTI, and it tells physician if the UTI originated as an E. coli, and it tells physician what antibiotic to use to treat that UTI. All of that is done in 1 hour directly from patient sample.
Wow.
So, yeah, so this is a platform that we've been working on for about 4 years. We started with a sketch on a whiteboard, and since then we've been able to build an alpha product that we deployed in 3 hospitals.
Wow. Um, so the product itself is bringing specificity in terms of the diagnosis and its background, the ability to be more specific in terms of the precision medicine around the antibiotics that you can deliver, but also doing it in an incredibly rapid fashion compared to the current standard of care.
Absolutely, absolutely.
How did you go from this idea then? Take me back to, so when the company started, you've got this whiteboard with an idea. How do you go from that to where you are now? Because what an incredible journey in 4 years.
Yeah, so um, in Maryland we have a like a like a the state has a VC arm called TEDCO, and I had a good relationship with TEDCO because even as a student I like to speak at events. Um, So I kind of knew them, got in touch with them. They gave me the first check. And that was just like proof of concept. Let's make sure this actually works. So I got 150K from Tetco, and um, I looked at my friend who was helping me at the time. I was like, listen, if we can build a prototype with this, we can get more money. So from there, we built a prototype. It was very promising results, and we applied to Y Combinator. And from YC, we got an investment, and then we raised a pre-seed round. A small pre-seed round was like 800K.
Hmm.
And I said, Kevin, if we can deploy this, get real clinical data, we could actually be able to raise a seed round. So we hit these milestones, raised 5 million in a seed round, and that helped us build that alpha product that we currently are working with.
Wow. Where does the entrepreneurial side of you come from? Because this is, you built and sold a company early on in your, in your life, not just career, but you were very, very young when that happened. Is that something that's just natural to you in terms of just to sort of, get up and do things and try things, move fast and break things? Where does that come from?
Honestly, it's just like you find a problem and you get obsessed with the problem, and you just like someone has to do something about it. And if it's not me, then who's gonna fix this issue, right? And I would say the underlying problem with the first startup is no one would hire a refugee. So I had to figure something out, and I started consulting, but it I could not go to school full time and consult.
Yeah.
So I decided to build that software, and I just got lucky that the company that I was helping found out about the software, and they were like, "We'll give you money if you give us the software." So like we were never incorporated. I did not even have a bank account, so we went to my mother's bank account. Um, so again, that was entrepreneur by accident. Then, my grandfather's illness, another problem. Like I thought I wanted to be a professor. Really, I never thought I would I
Mm.
would become like an entrepreneur and chase investors asking people for money. I thought it was too weird to ask for money. I don't know.
Yeah. 100%. And you mentioned that the product now is live as a prototype in 3 healthcare systems. So
Absolutely.
where is the company as we speak, in terms of, your development and sort of commercialization of the product?
Yeah. So um, with the so this alpha, so our goal was to get 90% accuracy. The alpha outperformed, got 95.7% accuracy, and the issue now is taking this alpha and make it a beta. Beta is the one that we commercialize. So right now we're raising our Series A in order to take the alpha, make it a beta, commercialize it.
Yeah. And so the alpha is being used to gather data, improve clinical validation, and show that this works and it can have an impact.
Yeah. The alpha works exactly like the final product. It just
Yeah.
does not look or interact like the final product.
Yeah, makes sense. Where does where's the competitive landscape sit with this? Because this
Mhm.
feels like a necessity, right? It feels like something that should be in hospitals already, and also there's you would imagine there's big companies with eyes on something
Yeah.
like this, right? So, um, why doesn't this exist already, and why isn't this something that patients have access to so far?
Right. So for the longest time, it was like, all right, is the patient showing symptoms? First step, let's identify the bacteria that is causing the infection, and then let's figure out antibiotic sensitivity. The innovation that we thought was obvious is, why are we identifying the bacteria? That takes 2 days, right? So what if we skip the second step, go from symptoms directly to antibiotic sensitivity? So idea is simple. If a human is alive, they're consuming oxygen. If a human dies, they stop consuming oxygen. So why don't we look at the oxygen use of bacteria? So there's this dye called reshape. Reshape has an oxygen molecule. The bacteria produces NADH. NADH plus O2 becomes, you know, water, and then another form of the dye becomes pink called resarufin. We detect the change in that. A very simple idea. If oxygen is being used, there's bacteria. If you add antibiotics and the oxygen stops being used, well, the bacteria died. The problem with that is, with skipping the identification is not something that physicians are used to. It's not something that the market, um, has thought of before. Just because this is how we're doing it, why are we changing? And slowly we're showing that it actually works to do the sensitivity without identification.
Mm. And your scientific background, you've got PhDs in mechanical engineering. Have you utilized other science? Have you brought in other scientific expertise to help you with the sort of biological elements of this?
Absolutely. The smartest person I know is our CSO. His name's Chris Skipwith, and he's just an unbelievable scientist. He has a PhD in biophysics from UPenn, and he's been a great addition to the team. Also have a chemical engineer on staff, and I have a bioengineer. So there are 4 of us right now.
And are they all part of the founding team? Were they brought in early to help achieve the purpose?
They came on board a little bit later. Yeah, so I co-founded the company with Kevin, but then Kevin moved. Kevin is a computer scientist. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Interesting. And so what do the goals look like for you from here then, Mustafa, over so you've got this alpha in place and what does the beta look like? When is that? How big do we go?
Yeah. So the goal is to close the Series A by Q2 2026. Use that money to go from alpha to beta. Use the beta for clinical trials, and deploy it in hospitals by Q3 2027. So we have about $30 million in pre-commercialization contracts. These are like, LOIs. They're non-binding, but we just think if we can get these converted, it would be a nice first start to commercializing this, make it, more widespread.
Hmm. And then in terms of like regulatory pathway and
Mhm.
how does the product become, what does the plan look like on that side?
Well, so the good news is no one has thought of our idea before. The bad news, that means we don't have a predicate device and we have to go de novo. So we met with the FDA, we had a pre-submission meeting, and the outcome was, hey, you guys go de novo, find one patient segment that you think you can balance risk, benefit, and certainty that your product helped. And that's why we decided to start with catheterized patients in hospitals. So that's going to be our beachhead market. Just a quick background on these guys. They get UTIs all the time, especially patients with neurogenic bladders where there's colonization in their bladders that turn into infections. And they have no feeling to know that they became infections.
So you've already been able to identify a population of people that you can really prove the purpose of this product and the clinical validation there.
Absolutely. So we went from doing testing on general population, so anyone that walks into the ER, anyone that goes into urology practices, and then we've kind of shifted our focus to patients with neurogenic bladder. Uh, Not only is it a big market, but also these guys get UTIs every other month. So antibiotic resistance is big in that group. That's why we decided to kind of start there.
Mm. And with your role in the company now, so you're now the role of CEO, that's the role you're performing. What does that mean at this stage of the company? I mean, because we talk on this show, obviously this year so much about fundraising, right, and the ability to sort of be in the eyes of and the faces of the right people and investors and so forth.
Uh-huh.
What do you have to focus on right now for Aztec to be a success?
I speak to customers, so I speak to patients, I speak to physicians, and just learn about their problems. And then, of course, I speak to investors. So my main goal is to keep the lights on, but also know what problem we're solving.
Mm. That's good to hear that you're in the face of ultimately the patients and customers and the healthcare systems that will utilize it.
Yeah.
Um, what about in terms of how you guys are setting up Aztec as a company outside of just the science and the unmet need? Because that sounds like a really just natural, as we hope, home run. But what do you intend to do with Aztec as a company to ensure sort of long-term success as a business and as a company in the market?
Yeah. So y- y- first, we need to do regulatory right. We need to make sure there's reimbursement for our test, and we need to make sure that, of course, we're benefiting a patient population long term. So that's really the basis of starting our company. At the same time, we understand that urine is one sample type, but also we do blood, and that's the second panel that we're planning to commercialize. And with blood, we're targeting sepsis patients. For every hour without proper antibiotics for sepsis patients, there is 7% less chance of survival. So if you have to wait for a culture for 2 days, it's probably a death sentence if you have given the wrong antibiotic. The third panel is CSF, so patients with meningitis. It's not a huge market, but the need for rapid antibiotic sensitivity testing and like you have to treat these patients very quickly because it gets bad very quick. And the fourth panel is wound effluent, and so sometimes you have trauma, you get some injury that needs surgery, and what we do is we test these samples very quickly, tell the physician if there is an infection that needs to be treated. Because if you do surgery and the wound is infected, you are risking the patient developing sepsis. Yeah. So
Wow. So
that's from one end. The other end is going back to my grandfather, right? So one, by the time he was in pain, he was saying like I have a small lower back pain. He was talking about like a little fever. And if you speak to a physician directly, this might mean nothing. You sleep weird, you get back pain. But because we have been able to collect so much data, this data is what symptoms did the patient show up with, what results we got, and then the outcome. We were able to create a system with the help of Dr. Suzanne Garofalo-Metzger, who's been researching this for 10 years, that from basic symptoms, we're able to predict the likelihood of UTI. So now the patient with this web application will know if they should contact their physician. And that's kind of our long-term play where we bring uh, the treatment or the diagnosis closer to the home instead of the patient always having to go to the doctor.
So is that for a population of patients that are susceptible to recurring UTI infections where they, rather than having to continuously, go into to hospitals or see their doctors,
Yeah.
um, the same sort of type of population that you're doing the initial, you know, testing on at the moment now to
Mhm.
prove the sort of validation, is that for them types of, carriers that would need
Yeah.
something a bit more frequent?
Exactly. So the idea is every time we run pilots on a specific patient segment, we collect all this data, feed it into the model, and the model now can help these patients. So our first one is patients with neurogenic bladder. They have recurring UTIs. So we need to make sure, one, there's less anxiety, because
Yeah,
you don't need to call your doctor
yeah,
every time. But there's also kind of flagging of symptoms that you really need to pay attention to and talk to your physician. So the goal here is to start with that and then go for women, postmenopausal women, because the problem of UTI is huge there, and then go to pregnant women. And we just go down the list of from where the problem is big and you go until you reach the simple cystitis, like there's honeymoon cystitis, right? Like someone had too much sex, they get a UTI, which is very simple UTI. You just go and get antibiotics and solve it. So for me, that is the lowest priority
yeah.
right now.
So actually, you see the company going through. So the initial urine based test is going to get you through to commercialization, products into healthcare systems, and then you're going to be expanding the different tests into all the different methods of, like you said, blood, CSF,
Mhm.
etc. But then also you want to become a better predictor of if what somebody is experiencing is a UTI, because that also helps take the burden off healthcare systems, right? Where people are going in and clogging up waiting rooms and delaying, processes
Yeah.
and workflows. Because I mean, we all know that it doesn't matter what type of diagnosis you're in. Half
Yeah.
the challenge is that these systems are so busy and they're sort of bursting at the seams with how many patients they have to see.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking to customers and hospital executives, it seems like every patient segment will have a different priority. For
Right.
example, you're talking about ER patients. The priority is to move these patients either like to discharge or to the floors, which means you need to know that the antibiotic is working or the patient is getting better. So we're providing enough information for the physicians to move these patients and then less waiting when you go to the emergency department. Then let's say the patient has a complicated UTI, which, it, there's the risk of developing sepsis. Now the priority becomes let's treat this patient very quickly so sepsis does not happen. Because if you think about it, reimbursement is like $8,000 for complicated UTI, but then you have sepsis where like reimbursement is like 32,000. So now insurance companies they want to minimize how much they're paying. Then, if the patient does have sepsis, you need to avoid getting a septic shock because the reimbursement for septic shock is $71,000. So, yeah. And let's say the patient is sick. The hospital, what they care about is to shortening the stay, because the shorter the stay is, the more money they can keep from the reimbursement.
I understand. Yeah. You've talked about reimbursement a few times already, which is really
Yep.
refreshing because the companies that aren't at seed stage aren't tackling reimbursement, and this happens. You'd be surprised how many early stage sort of founding teams at seed stage haven't addressed the reimbursement strategy, haven't hired market access reimbursement strategists to come in and sort of go, we need to get ahead of this. This is going to take years.
Uh-huh.
What do you see, or how do you see your path to reimbursement? Because it sounds like the product specifically is a very favorable position, and sort of bringing that to the big insurers and payers would be something that they would be really keen for. But do you see it being, I don't want to say straightforward, but do you sort of see yourself that you're in a favorable position that if you can get the validation for the product, reimbursement should be, something that can follow quite naturally?
What I learned in the short time I've been looking into reimbursement is it's never straightforward.
Yes.
Uh, so if we look at the things that we do, right? So we confirm UTI, we identify E. coli, and then we tell what antibiotic to take. If you use the existing codes for these three things separately, we
Mm,
have reimbursement of about $90.
mm,
So that's one way we could look at it. The other way that we look at it is we apply for a PLA code. So there's like a meeting of approving PLA codes once a quarter. So it's a nice way to get started, but it's not a long-term solution. So what we're gonna do is let's start with a PLA code while we apply for a CPT code. And the CPT code is what we use long term. The goal here is to get around between $100 to up to $200, depending on what we end up getting. So let's say we charge $50 for the test, we sell it for 100. So we're making money because we have healthy margins, but then our customers also making money because the difference between 100 that they get versus the 50 that we're charging.
yeah,
So the way we're looking at it is to increase adoption, you need to incentivize customers, and to
sure.
incentivize customers, you still need a very good reimbursement code and very healthy pay for it.
Makes sense. Um, what do you see as the biggest challenges that you're going to face, Mustafa, over the next sort of 6 to 12 months, which is, a critical period for you guys as you raise Series A and sort of things start to ramp up? What do you think the biggest hurdles that you'll have to overcome as a company?
Fundraising, I mean, that's everyone's biggest hurdle these days. There's just so much pessimism out there. There's this cool thing that's called AI that is, sucking up all the money and nothing is left for diagnostics. At least that's how I feel these days. Having said that, there are diagnostic specialized VCs for diagnostics that we're meeting with. We actually just started the Series A on Monday. Um, so that's the biggest hurdle is the money. At this point, we have de-risked the market. We have de-risked the uh, technology. So all that's left is to get it in the hands of physicians. Of course, we have a new way of thinking when it comes to treatment, well, for diagnosing and therefore treatment. And that is going to come with challenges because every time we go to a value analysis committee, the question is going to come up. So, how are you doing this without identifying the bacteria? So, I expect some headwinds there, but with time, that's going to be resolved.
Mm. Do you feel, when did you raise your seed round?
June of last year.
Do you feel the difference, even though they're two obviously dramatically different rounds and value, the amount of capital you're trying to raise,
Mhm.
but do you feel a difference from raising the seed versus raising now in terms of the landscape for diagnostics funding? Does it feel better, worse, the same? How does it feel from your perspective?
So, it feels different because when the seed round, people would look at me and say, "Oh, well, he has a good team. We're going to invest." But now that we're looking at, a lot bigger, like much bigger checks,
Yeah.
people are looking at different things. People are asking about reimbursement. People are asking about things that never came up in the seed round. And what I learned from fundraising is it takes some learning, like a learning curve for founder to get up to speed with the questions, the new questions that are coming up. Um, the pessimism is way worse than it was a year and a half ago, and it's night and day from 2021 when I raised the first round. It's totally different.
Pessimism with regards to what, Mustafa? The macroeconomics in just in the sentiment in
Yeah,
or specific to life sciences?
both. So, unfortunately, there hasn't been so much activity in mergers and acquisitions when it comes to diagnostics. And
Yeah.
I think the last big one was like Specific Diagnostics 3 years ago. So, so that's one thing with diagnostics. The second thing is, well, the macro economy is kind of uncertain these days. So people are sitting on their money. They're not sure what to do with it. So it's, I think, these two things that are dictating the fundraising climate for us.
Yeah, interesting. I think there was a little bit of positivity came out of the amount of early investment um, in September. And
Hmm.
actually, when I looked back and did analysis, actually, I looked back, I was like, well, July and August were so slow that it was just a backlog. And actually, we haven't
Yeah,
progressed whatsoever. And
yeah,
now getting to the end of October, I'm about to be proven right. So, because there's been very little, seed Series A again in
yeah.
October. Um, the $1 billion-to-1 announcement of them intending to gear up for IPO is a positive, but
That's good.
we need more of that. Them sort of them big exits
Absolutely.
that give investors confidence. Do you find um, that investors from the seed round are keen to jump into the Series A, or is there question marks from them saying, do we need more proof of concept? Do we need you to be a bit further along in order for us to jump in again?
They're actually very excited to jump in again, especially with the Series A, and the company is going to look very different very soon.
Yeah,
So everyone is very excited. Everyone that has invested in us, especially the ones that were on board like early on, they
yeah,
have seen the progress that we have made in very short period of time, and that's why I think they're very eager to invest more, at least exercise their pro forma. I mean,
yeah. That I mean, 4 years from concept, I mean, sort of almost pre-concept, right? From idea to where you guys are now and about to sort of, the fact that you've got prototypes in healthcare systems is absolutely rapid. So that's super exciting. Um, so Series A is looking. You're looking to close that when? How long does that you intend that to take, Mustafa? What's the goal with that one?
the goal is to close by Q2
By
2026.
Q2. So actually, we've got some pretty interesting milestones coming up for you over the next sort of. I mean, it's only sort of 6 months, less maybe.
Yeah.
Um, Mustafa, the purpose behind the product and the unmet need in combination sounds super exciting, doesn't it? It you guys feel like you're bringing something to market for all the right reasons. And I think in diagnostics, sometimes I get to witness this quite a lot. Sometimes the biggest problem in the industry is that early stage research gets pushed into private company and starts to be developed as a product, but the
Hmm.
unmet need was actually never there. And
Yeah.
actually, it feels like how you've explained it, finding a problem first and working backwards to solve that is what most of diagnostics would actually thrive in if we could all sort of focus on that. But obviously it's not easy to always do that, and we understand. But it feels like you guys have got a really valid reason to be doing this, an unmet need that needs to be solved, and the right reasons to do it. It
Yeah.
feels like momentum is in your sales. It feels like a really exciting time to be at Aztec, and things are about to go on a hockey stick sort of growth from here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very exciting. And um, we were never a science in search of a problem. So
Right.
you know, and I think it comes back to, I worked 7 years. So while I was building my startup, the consulting gig that I had that I ended up selling Startup 2 was a market discovery firm. So I learned how to speak to customers. So I prioritized that the whole time. And then there's actually a book called The Mom Test. Have you
Okay.
heard of it?
No.
It's the best book I have seen on speaking to customers. So I really encourage everyone to read it. It's a very short book um, by Bob Fitzpatrick. He's a YC founder. So that's really my favorite business book.
We don't often get book recommendations on the show. I'm glad the Mum Test. I'm going to provide a link to that for listeners. That's awesome.
You should. So the first time I pitched, and it was this small angel investor, and he was like, "Well, you're a scientist. What do you know about business?" And I was like, "I agree with this guy. I don't know anything about business." So I read hundreds of books. All I did was read, like, and then use like snippets from the different books to build my slide deck and just learn about like psychology and all that stuff. It's fun. So I know many books that could be helpful.
Um, now you're the two-time CEO, and bringing this to market. Do you like being a CEO? Is it something that gets you out of bed every day, or are you still sort of driven by that same sort of fire in your belly from everything that personally happened to you and your family?
I don't think. I mean, there are nice things I like about being a CEO, which is like because I work with smart people, very
Yeah,
smart people every single day. I love that. Like this
yeah,
conversation. You don't get that everywhere. There are hard things about it. As a startup, it's ups and downs. And when you think about like, well, I have some employees and they all have mortgages, and if I don't do well, guess what? They can't pay their
yeah,
mortgages. So
yeah,
like that idea is so scary, you know, especially like when you're like a 4 or 5 person team, you're close. Like, you're like a little family. So
yeah,
that's the hard part. The good part is you see your baby grow up. The idea that you came up with is now breadboard prototype and an alpha prototype. As soon as gonna be a product, and maybe one day I'm gonna be walking a hospital with a UTI, and they're gonna use my product on me. That's cool.
yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. We're very lucky to work in an industry that has such a profound impact on people's lives, even
Absolutely.
if diagnostics sometimes lives in the shadows amongst therapeutic drug development and med device on the other side. But we're at the forefront of everything, and I think that's incredibly exciting to feel like you get to play a part in these changes to people's lives and healthcare systems.
Absolutely.
Um, and we had Scott O'Brien on the show, who's obviously on board as your chief commercial officer. He was awesome. Scott's insights into commercial strategy and execution about how they did things at Genmark was one of the most fascinating insights I've ever seen. Um,
Yeah.
Scott's great. So it sounds like you've
Yeah.
assembled a great team around you.
Yeah. We're very lucky to have him. He's been awesome. Like, um, every time he talks to VCs, like, in meetings and stuff, they're blown away by how smart he is, by how knowledgeable he is.
Yeah, love that. Mustafa, this has been awesome. I love the product. I love the purpose, and I love the trajectory you guys are on. I'm really excited to see the announcement on Series A in Q2 next year. I have no doubts that that'll be a success, and you'll get what you need. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I let you go?
Uh, no, I think we covered it all. I'm so lucky to be in this field, and let's build something people want.
Yeah, and you've got a smile on your face, Mustafa, and that's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, but you seem to be enjoying it. So that's the main thing. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for coming on and sharing your
Thank you.
story and also the reason why you're doing this and an insight into the company. It's been fantastic to hear.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.